শুভ সময় বন্ধুরা, আবার আরেকটা লাইভে আমরা আজকে যুক্ত হলাম। আমাদের যে অনেকগুলো মোটো রয়েছে তার মধ্যে একটা হচ্ছে বর্ণবাদ। আমরা যেমন অনেকগুলো বিষয় নিয়ে কথা বলি, তেমনি একটা বিষয় হচ্ছে বর্ণবাদ। আজকে দক্ষিণ আফ্রিকার বর্ণবাদ, রাজনৈতিক পরিস্থিতি এবং সামগ্রিক বিষয় নিয়ে আমাদের সাথে স্টুডিওতে এই মুহূর্তে উপস্থিত রয়েছেন লুসিয়ান সেগামি। লুসিয়ান সেগামি হচ্ছেন ইন্টারন্যাশনাল রিলেশনশিপ হেড ফর দ্য ন্যাশনাল এডুকেশন হেলথ অ্যান্ড অ্যালাইড ওয়ার্কার ইউনিয়ন। তিনি হচ্ছেন একজন সাধারণ সদস্য সাউথ আফ্রিকান কমিউনিস্ট পার্টির কেন্দ্রীয় কমিটির এবং এএনসি এ ফরমার স্টুডেন্ট লিডার। এছাড়াও তার আরো কিছু পরিচয় রয়েছে, আমরা এগুলো তার মুখ দিয়ে শুনবো। আমাদের লাইভটি আজকে কিছুটা বিভ্রাট হতে পারে, কারণ লুসিয়ান বাংলা বলতে পারে না এবং আমাদের বাংলার দর্শকটা একটু বেশি, এবং অবশ্যই যারা বাংলাতে শোনেন তারা সবাই ইংরেজিও বোঝেন, আমি এটা জানি এবং এটা বিশ্বাস করি। আমাদের অনেকদিন পরে একজন আলোচক। আমরা আসলে সবসময় আন্তর্জাতিক পরিমণ্ডলের এই বিষয়গুলো নিয়ে আলোকপাত করি। এর আগে আপনারা দেখেছেন পাকিস্তান থেকে একজন কমিউনিস্ট পার্টির মেম্বার এসেছেন, দিক থেকে এসেছেন, কানাডা থেকে এসেছেন, বিভিন্ন দেশ থেকে বিভিন্ন সময় নারীবাদের উপরে, বর্ণবাদের উপরে, পলিটিক্যাল ক্রাইসিস, কমিউনিজম, বিভিন্ন বিষয়ের উপরে আলোচনা করতে আমাদের সাথে বিভিন্ন আলোচকরা উপস্থিত হন এবং আমরা তাদের কাছ থেকে সেই দেশ পলিটিক্স, সেই দেশের কালচার, সেই দেশের বিভিন্ন এডুকেশন, বিভিন্ন বিষয়, হেলথ সেক্টর, বিভিন্ন বিষয় নিয়ে আমরা তাদের সাথে আলোচনা করি। এছাড়া আমাদের সাথে আমাদের আর একজন সহযোদ্ধা, সহকর্মী ইলিয়াস আহমেদ। ইলিয়াস ভাই আমাদের সবার প্রিয় মানুষ, তিনিও আমাদের সাথে যুক্ত রয়েছেন। শুভ সময় ইলিয়াস ভাই, কেমন আছেন আপনি?
শুভ সময়, ভালো আছি।
আমরা চলে যাব লুসিয়ান সেগমির
আচ্ছা,
কাছে। হাই লুসিয়ান, জি ইলিয়াস ভাই।
তো ওর একটু বর্ণনা করি যে আমরা কি কথা বললাম। হুম, কি বলেন?
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, বলেন
হ্যাঁ,
বলেন।
Lucian, moment, explain about your position and what is our issue about discussion today. So we're going to uh, start our today discussion, and you have maximum for 15 minutes to describe about our issue, what is going on South Africa, what was racism and apartheid, and how you fought against all of this, how was the struggle, what was the situation in that time, and after the victory of the struggle. Floor is yours, and you please part by part and slowly, because maybe we need translation in Bengali moment.
No, not now. You are the
Okay, you can
translator.
speak slowly and clearly. The reason of maybe all of our viewer, they don't know English well, or they can't accent is not like South Africa, so it will be maybe difficult. So we request to you slowly and clearly you can explain us. Thank you.
Oh, no, this side it is in the evening. So let me say good evening and thank you very much, Comrade Momen, Comrade Elias, for the introduction. And let me thank you also as the organizers of this discussion and for the opportunity, for us to share some thoughts on the developments of the revolutionary process in South Africa. I think it's important for us to exchange in this way. I must just mention that we are also interested in understanding how the struggle is unfolding in Bangladesh. It's important for us for our own struggle, to exchange politically, ideologically, because partly also South Africa, we have a very significant Bangladeshi, community residing here in South Africa. And I think, sometimes we would like to have, some of them who are workers, join our trade unions. We would like to have some of them who are workers join the Communist Party, for instance, and to support, progressive demands. But I think culturally, there's a very big gap. We don't understand each other very well in terms of, and I'm not now talking about the local population. So I think it's important that ourselves, through these exchanges, we can bridge the gap. So I just wanted to highlight that, why it's important for us to, to keep on having discussions such as this. So very briefly, let me just try to, I hope you can hear me. Let me just recap, try and summarize the situation.
We are hearing.
Thank you. Try to summarize the situation in South Africa. I think that, and I'm sure that we share the same analysis with yourselves, that society has gone through through many epochs in the development of capitalism. Before then, primitive communism, slavery, feudalism, capitalism. So we are currently in the capitalist stage of development. But the capitalist stage of development is in a particular phase which we refer to as imperialist globalization. So capitalism itself, it's in its highest phase, the phase of imperialism. So this is how we approach the kind of period in which we are functioning. The second thing that we want to underline is that in South Africa, we pretty much also operate under what we call a neoliberal economic framework. This is our reality of our current situation. Maybe we never thought we will be here today, but this is the reality in the state, in the economy, in the workplace, in our communities. But in spite of all that, we are still pursuing the struggle for social justice, the struggle, what we call the National Democratic Revolution. I know that the conditions have changed because we achieved our freedom in 1994. That's almost 30 years ago. But we have not really completed the phase of the National Democratic Revolution. There are many debates that we are having inside of our movement. And I'll come to talk briefly of the way in, what is the makeup, the structure of the movement for national liberation in South Africa later. But we have not achieved all the promises that we and all the goals of the National Democratic Revolution. We have an alliance. We are in alliance with basically we have what we call the National Liberation Movement is an alliance of 4 components. So firstly is a movement of the national bourgeoisie, what we call the African National Congress, the ANC, which is the ruling party in power in state. It is a party that on behalf of this alliance contests national elections. Excuse me. It contests national elections, but the people who are on the list of parliament, they come from all of these other constituents, not only the ANC. And then the second one would be COSATU, which is a trade union federation. It has about close to 2 million workers, to be exact, about 1.8 million workers. And then we have the South African Communist Party. It's one of the oldest Communist Party. I think it's the oldest in the African continent. This year, the Communist Party is turning 102 years. 102 years. So it's a very old party, formed in 1921. It has a history before 1921, but officially it was formed in 1921, called as the Communist Party of South Africa. Then the fourth component of our alliance is the South African National Civics Organization. So these are civil society organizations. They operate in the communities. They deal with the issues of public safety in our communities. They deal with issues of delivery of the basics, water, electricity. They deal with issues of housing amongst the community. And there are many other activities that SANCO, as a civil society organization, helps to strengthen the views of the National Liberation Movement in our community. So those are the four basically organizations that we have. But I just want to mention that there are many contradictions in this alliance. Particularly now, these are not new contradictions, but they've become more intensified. I think the first contradiction is that if you look at this alliance, it is also a class alliance. So both the Communist Party and COSATU represent predominantly working class, the proletariat, industrial proletariat in South Africa, and then the ANC. It's more or less, and from a historical point of view, it's a movement of the national bourgeoisie. It's a broad liberation movement. It's a movement of the national bourgeoisie. So there are many contradictions, as in the case of many other national liberation struggles throughout the world. The Communist Party is a vanguard party of the working class, which ultimately want to construct socialism in South Africa. But at the same time, because of the colonial reality, and I'll talk about that again later on, we had to cooperate and form an alliance with the ANC from as far back as the early 1920s to the late 1920s, when we started working very strongly with the African National Congress, up until the all political parties were banned. The Communist Party was the first party to be banned in 1950 under a law called the Suppression of Communism Act. It disbanded itself, and then it was relaunched secretly underground, and it operated under a new name, South African Communist Party. Previously, it was called the Communist Party of South Africa. And it played a very important role in the military struggle. It established the military wing for the movement, which was called Umkhonto weSizwe, the Spear of the Nation. So this military wing, which was armed, was formed by the Communist Party and the African National Congress, the ANC, jointly. So the commander-in-chief the main commanders were both from Nelson Mandela on the one hand, and then Joe Slovo was representing the Communist Party, were the main commanders. Nelson Mandela, and I'm sure by now some of you know that when he passed away, the ANC itself declared openly for the very first time, I believe, that Nelson Mandela was a communist before he went to jail. He was not only a member of the Central Committee of the South African Communist Party, he was also a member of the Politburo. Although, this kind of history is not really mentioned, people tend to think Mandela, was just a nationalist, an icon for everyone, but he believed in socialist construction. So, but like I said, comrades, that there are many problems currently, especially this component that constitute the working class base within the broad national liberation movement, basically feel a sense of desertion of the national democratic revolution by the national bourgeoisie. So we are not happy. The working class in the country, I think in the trade unions, are not happy that the African National Congress remains genuinely committed to prosecuting the aims of the national democratic revolution. Sometimes you can see a lot of wavering, but when the working class component resists and fights and struggles, strengthens the class struggle, you can see that commitment tends to be restored. So it's not an easy kind of an alliance. It's not an easy struggle. It's a back and forth. I think it depends on what some call the balance of power. Who is strong? The extent to which the working class is strong at that particular moment within this particular alliance, which is why independently it is very important for the working class movement to continue to strengthen itself independently of the ANC. And let me just then come back to one of the issues that comrades had raised, which was, the origin of apartheid, and try to summarize it, not in so many words, because I'm sure we all know, some information about the origin of apartheid, because in the mid 17th century, to be 1652, there was a Dutch settlement in the part of South Africa called the Cape, under the Dutch East India Company. So this era really marked the beginning of colonialism in South Africa. All of us, we know ourselves. I'm not an English first language speaker. So English is also not my mother tongue. I have my mother tongue, and then English is my second language because we're forced through this colonialism to learn and understand English. But colonialism in South Africa was entrenched through ruthless exploitation, through the seizure of lands, extermination of indigenous people. People were killed. So it was not peaceful colonialism, which is anachronistic, really, if you think about it. That colonialism it means enslavement, coercion. It means forcing people to conform to the dictates of the colonial masters. So, like I said, there were a lot of killings that were done to exterminate indigenous people. Their cattle, their livestock were taken. And generally, people were denied of their livelihoods for many, many years before even the arrival of the British in South Africa, following mainly the Berlin Conference, when South Africa was basically handed over to Britain. And of course, the colonizers introduced many laws, legislation, passed laws. You had to carry, certain identity documents. They used all sorts of policies, including taxation, to uproot the indigenous people from their land, to restrict their movement and their freedom of choice, freedom of, and many other rights and freedom. So primitive accumulation to try and make it easy for comrade to understand. They used force to uproot working people from their means of livelihoods, from their land, and from their taking their properties, cattle, and so on. And then, of course, in the late 20th century, the capitalist industrial mining started with the discovery of gold and diamonds. And although there were brief contradictions between the British imperialists and Afrikaners, the Afrikaners are the descendants of this Dutch who landed here in 1652. But those contradictions were mitigated following a war called the Anglo-Boer War, which resulted in a settlement that unified the two white national groups into one white sort of nationality, South African nationalities. And the British and Afrikaners jointly continued to rule South Africa. Apartheid did not always exist throughout the colonial period. It was only introduced in around 1948-50, before 50 years before its collapse. And I think that the best explanation is that with the advent of imperialism, the Spanish won the Anglo-Boer War in South Africa, which Lenin makes reference to in Imperialism, the highest stage to capitalism. The industrial capitalist mining required massive financial investment from the British, occasioned by intense labor exploitation. So the best possible explanation was that the forces of production became a fitter to the relations of production. So apartheid could not continue to be gainful, to be productive, without introducing certain modification. So I think this is how we look at apartheid. So apartheid is not something new. Was basically a variant of how the capitalist ruling class will continue to rule under a period where they are now working with it's the Afrikaners and the Boer, and they had to manage this very big black population in South Africa, which constituted about 80% of the population. And they had to resort to, very fascistic methods to guarantee the rate of return in investment by the British and Western Europe. So essentially, I don't want to go into the detail, and maybe through questions I can engage in relation to how apartheid was, but essentially it was a very heinous system, a very barbaric system of racial discrimination, which was institutionalized. People's rights were very curtailed. We were separated on the basis of race, on the basis of even within what we call blacks. There was still compartmentalization, separation on the basis of ethnicity. Whether you are African, you are colored, you are Indian, which constituted what we call black. we were all separated. So the Indians, who, by the way, came from as far as Calcutta and so on in with the indentured labor system, arrived in South Africa, were separated from Africans, and the colored people were also separated. And people could not mix, we could not, intermarry, it was outlawed. There were certain laws which were passed deliberately to prohibit mixed marriages, including restricting movement of people. So Black Africans would be in the most backward ghettos in the townships, which were very poor and which had no services, which had no infrastructure, no transport, no hospitals, no clinics, nothing. They were just empty ghettos, reserves essentially for labor, where the white capitalist class would draw labor, free, cheap labor from. And there were many problems of discrimination, where people were forced to speak the language of this oppressive apartheid, which was called Afrikaans. And of course, in the 70s, the youth in this country objected to that and fought viciously, resulting in many school-going kids. I mean, these were children who were shot and killed because they rendered South Africa ungovernable. And these kids, the students, were following in the call of the then president of the African National Congress in exile, saying, let's render South Africa ungovernable. And partly the mass mobilization internally is what led to the breakthrough. And I just want to then move on towards sort of concluding to say in the early 20th century, the indigenous people had formed their own organizations, led by African liberals who were demanding certain rights and would from time to time, send delegations to England to go and ask the king or the queen for changes. But later, these elements became radicalized. These liberals became radicalized. And I think thanks to the guidance of the Communist International, especially, the resolution on the colonial question, the Communist Party was able to strengthen itself and its ideological line. There was a policy called the Black Republic thesis. Essentially, this recognized that the indigenous, the native proletariat was very central to the construction of an independent Black Republic in South Africa. As opposed to the illusion then that, because the Communist Party at that time was predominantly a white party. It was formed by, the descendants of some of the emigrants from Europe, Eastern Europe, in the late 19th century. So in essence, the party leaders had to accept that in the colonial countries, the revolution doesn't necessarily just have to be led by workers. It could also be led by non-proletarian social forces like the ANC, and in Latin America, I'm sure in Asia as well as in Africa, there are many examples where the struggle for independence against imperialism was led by forces who were not necessarily working class. So that was broadly accepted, that our colonial situation was not the same as in the in the imperialist, in the advanced capitalist countries. So that theoretical line of the Communist International brought the Communist Party very close to, and the trade union movement very close to the African National Congress. That alliance has existed for many years. And now, answering the question, Comrade Elias is asking, how did we fight? I think that once your theoretical line is very clear, you understand who is the enemy, who are you fighting against, who are you, yourself. You have to define yourself, you have to explain who you represent and why. And so we were very clear about the character of the enemy in South Africa, and we said, and we were very clear as this liberation movement that the most immediate aim of the struggle is freedom and independence, meaning we have we need a new constitution. The apartheid government must be removed. All the laws that were discrimination laws, the racist laws, had to be abolished, and we need a new election based on one man, one vote. So these were some of the basic principles. The liberation of Black people in particular, and in general, and Africans in particular. So this is how we summarized what the main objective was all about. And then the tactics towards that strategy included four main pillars or tactics. Mass mobilization, we used the underground struggle. Number two, the armed struggle, and international solidarity work. So in many fronts, apartheid was isolated internationally, with many people supporting the struggle against apartheid, which was regarded ultimately by the United Nations as a crime against humanity. And many countries opened their borders for the ANC, the SACP activists. So mass mobilization was very, very central internally, but it could not succeed without being accompanied by the underground struggle, the armed struggle, and international solidarity work. So all of this had to be combined, and depending on concrete conditions, one would be a bit more pronounced than the other, and but in a very harmonious way. These were the four main pillars of the national liberation struggle. And these are not just like cast in stone. I think there were many other tactics that were not acceptable to the liberation movement, and because they were not suitable to conditions in South Africa. So from country to country, this would be very different. And then I'm closing up now. Sorry, comrades, to be long, but just to summarize by saying that I think that I've mentioned the issue that our transition entailed compromises on both sides. We in 1994, which is the year in which we gained our freedom, at that point, the apartheid could not maintain its oppressive rule because of the high level of resistance. But at the same time, the insurrectionary seizure of power was not possible as yet. We did not have a military wing that was capable of overthrowing the apartheid regime militarily. So we had to negotiate. There were compromises. We agreed on a new constitution, on one man, one vote, which we achieved in '94. But I think a lot of people feel we compromise too much, that we have political power, but we don't have economic power today, But some of the contradictions grew, and with the new government, policies, not sticking to historic policies such as the Freedom Charter, because in our history we have very important moments where we defined very clear the goals about the national liberation struggle. So in 1996, our government introduced a very reactionary neoliberal economic policy called GEAR, Growth, Employment, and Redistribution. But it really was the origin of what we call the consolidation of neoliberalism today, because it led to capital flight, tariff. It advocated for the relaxation of tariffs, liberalization, and then a capital flight, as I mentioned. So most of the companies in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange left South Africa and listed in London and so on. And we inherited a huge public debt. The infrastructure was only meant for 5% of the population, which is why currently we have, intermittent blackouts, because electricity now is available to almost 99% of the population, but it's the same infrastructure that only served 5%. So neoliberalism remains the dominant economic policy currently. There's a very strong resistance on the part of the working people. I think there's a lot of unhappiness, many contradictions, but the struggle continues. We have a very strong trade union movement, which has been very radical since even the 1920s, where Black people were not really allowed to form their own trade unions. It was mainly the Afrikaners were allowed to form trade unions. But currently, the situation has changed. In the 1950s, we had the SACTU, which, when it was formed, immediately affiliated to the World Federation of Trade Unions. And through international solidarity from the WFTU in the main, the trade union movement continues to be strong. I've said that there are many contradictions, but let me just leave it there for now, comrades, and allow the discussion. Maybe if there are questions, I can be happy to respond to some. Thank you very much.
Moment.
হ্যাঁ, আপনি একটু এটা ট্রান্সলেট করেন, তো তারপর বিবি হওয়ার কাছে যাব।
Okay, I think it was very interesting speech from you. And I want to ask you, as you told us that there was some promises when you did democratic movement. You can tell us the main principal promises in that time and what was fulfilled until now. Thank you.
Should I respond now?
Yeah, response is my question,
Okay.
and then my other colleague will also ask you.
Okay. Now, in the main, I'm referring to, and I'm sure if you do an internet search, there's a document of the ANC called the Freedom Charter. It's a South African historic document. Now, that document was very clear in relation to what kind of a new South Africa we espouse. It advocated for the nationalization of the banks, for nationalization of industry. It advocated for land redistribution, because currently land ownership patterns are very unequal. A very small white, historically a privileged population still owns majority of productive land in South Africa. Now, this is 30 years, down the line following the democratic breakthrough in South Africa. So if you look at point by point, we have not been able to unravel some of the contradictions of apartheid. We remain one of the most unequal society. I think we are number one in terms of inequality in the whole world. Yet we have so much resources in the country. The banks have not been nationalized. There has not been redistribution of the land. We have done, and I'm not trying to say there are no achievements at all, because there are areas in which our movement has done very well. You know, if you look at, for instance, education, there are still some problems, but we've done very well. If you look at housing for the poor, we've done relatively well. We built over 2 million houses for the poor who never had access to housing. The question of electricity and energy was extended to majority of the people of South Africa. But it doesn't end there. We still are locked in this economic disparity in relation to ownership of the land. And now, in relation to our agrarian strategy, we thought that in the democratic period, a thoroughgoing land reform program would underpin a process of major industrialization in the country. But unfortunately, that is not the case. And why we think it's a big problem is precisely because we have completely shifted away from these commitments in the land claims document, in the claims document, in the Freedom Charter, into adopting a neoliberal program of austerity and cuts in expenditure. You know, so briefly, this is how I can respond to your question, Comrade Elias. Thanks.
Okay. Do you think that in this way you can gain your democratic movement commitment? You can solve this democratic movement commitment. You are allying with the ANC, and everything is going rightist capitalism system. So, what do you want to do about this? How you fulfill your democratic movement commitment promises? Do you understand?
Yeah, I think we have been debating in and to try to update ourselves about the contemporary situation in South Africa. And I think one of the things is we realize that, you know, the national bourgeoisie is inherently vacillating. You know, today it's a bit progressive in terms of the democratic revolution is committed. Tomorrow, it talks something else. It agrees with the IMF, with the World Bank, with the rating agencies on the implementation of austerity. You know, so it vacillates from time to time. The only consistent, reliable political force is the working class, which is why we said now the national democratic revolution has to be under the leadership of the working class, without which capitalist rule in South Africa will be restored. It's very important for the working class to take ownership and leadership of the working class. This discussion has resulted into the South African Communist Party for the very first time in its 102-year history, 100-year history, deciding it's not the first time, because the Communist Party used to contest elections before it was banned in the 1940s. It even had representatives in the national parliament. But from that time, 1950 up to now, it has never contested elections. So that a decision was taken by the party at its last Congress to enter electoral politics. Not that we believe in construction, building socialism, or a parliamentary road to socialism, but precisely because you need the independent working class politics. In South Africa, you need a strong party to begin to raise the level of consciousness of working people without due regard to the objective interests of other non-proletariat classes, and to focus on the achievements of the goals that were defined in the Progressive National Liberation Program through the Freedom Charter documents and many other documents. So this is what we think is under threat, that there is no consistency on the part of the, especially the national bourgeoisie in South Africa, to pursue those goals. So the working class, in the main, the Communist Party and COSATU, the Trade Union Federation, will work together, supported, yes, by some nationalists who are genuine, who are not compradors of imperialist capital, will work together to cement the relationship. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lucian. My last question is, what is full meaning of COSATU?
COSATU stands for Congress of South African Trade Unions.
Okay, now we have with us Bibi Hawa. She want to talk with, discuss with you. Bibi Hawa, you have floor to discuss with Lucian.
ধন্যবাদ ইলিয়াস আহমেদ। আমাকে শুনতে পাচ্ছেন?
হ্যাঁ, বেবি।
হ্যাঁ, শুনতে পাচ্ছেন। তো আমি কিছুক্ষণ কথা বলি। আমার ভয়েস হয়তো একটু প্রবলেম হতে পারে। Hi, Lucian Segami. It's so pleasure to have you with us. I have few issues like I want to share with you. First of all, we know that the struggle against racism in South Africa has been one of the greatest inspiration, like for whole world, right? Can you hear me, Lucian Segami?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it's so nice to meet you. Okay, so I want to share one article. I want to draw your attention to this article. So this is about Oriana, right? So okay, you know about it.
Yes.
So
yes.
This is white only city in South Africa, right? And sorry, excuse me. So in 1990s, I think the country got rid of apartheid, right? But this proves that the spirit of apartheid or the legacy of apartheid is still alive in some places in South Africa. So how come this kind of city, Orania, whites only town, they have their own currency, they have their own banks, and they want to make it their, autonomous town, like autonomous city or whatever, autonomous place, right? So how come this kind of white only city gets approval from the state, and what is your role in this perspective? Yes, Lucian.
Okay, thank you, Comrade Bibi, for it's a very good question. As you correctly say, I mean, 30 years down the line, you still have a separate white enclave called Orania in South Africa existing.
This is so big thing. Like I got surprised. Like I got shocked when I saw this.
No, it's a reality where I
White
am now.
only city. Can you imagine in this world, like world of full of whatever democracy and everything, we have
Yeah,
white only city, like white only town. It's
certainly.
ridiculous. Yeah, please, Lucian.
Yes. So I'm only about 150 kilometers away from it where I am now, you know. So it's a reality. Actually, it's a town in between the Free State and Northern Cape province, in the main Northern Cape. Uh, so there, black people are not allowed to enter that town anytime they want to. They without permission. And if you are black, you go into the town with permission to do what you do and you leave. And workers are only allowed to come in at certain times. And they have their own currency.
Yeah,
It's a
on banks. Yeah.
yeah, it's a fictitious, it's a cryptocurrency of some sort, but it's a currency which they use to.
I saw the picture of currencies also. Like they have paper currency too.
Yes,
Right.
yes, yes,
Hmm.
yes.
Hmm.
But you know, Comrade Bibi, what do you do with such uh, people who are anti-change like these ones? What do you do?
Don't you
Do you?
think this is a like a failure of the state? As like we know, the whole world knows that in 1990s, like apartheid is gone, it is abolished, right?
Yeah,
But it's not hidden even. It's like it's open, like there is a
it's
city, no black can go there, no black can work there, right? And they are declaring themselves, yes, we live, we only white people will live here. So this is very shocking thing. I think আমাদের যারা দর্শক আছেন অনেকেই হয়তো এটা জানতেন না। আমি অনেক আগে এটা জানতাম না, কিন্তু জানার পর আমি খুবই শকড হয়েছি। যাই হোক, so my another observation is, I think this happened in 1919 maybe. So the name of the university is Stellenbosch, right? You have Stellen University, right?
yes,
So
yes,
there, one white student urinated on a black student's books, laptop. That white student went into his room, like in a dormitory, like university dormitory, and there was a big protest on this thing, right? So that is another observation I have. In 2019, 21,000 South Africans murdered. Is this information correct? This is
yes, yes,
21,000 in a year?
yes.
How?
That's
Like
correct.
who are they? 21,000 murdered in
Yes.
2019. So how did that happen?
Okay, let me just firstly go back to the issue of Orania,
Mhm.
comrade, because you see, this is a very small population of whites, Afrikaners, who are trying to salvage what is essentially a collapsing Afrikaner nationalism, which is extremely right wing. Now we are Democrats, so we don't want to clamp down on this population with its racist behavior. But the revolution must educate the young ones, the little ones who are coming, you know, about the need for change, about because some of the kids they are brought up by the domestic workers who are black, you know. So this process cannot be stopped. That finally you will have you know, the almost change, but which is not coerced, which is not forced by, because you can legislate away apartheid, but in the consciousness of the right wing, of those who are backward, it will remain there for many years, for more than 100 years. Elements of apartheid will continue.
Lucian, just let me ask you one thing.
Yes.
Is this only about consciousness? They are public, right? They're declaring themselves that this is only white town, right? White only town. So is this like indirect kind of racism? This is direct racism, right?
No, it's direct. It's direct.
Yeah.
It's direct racism. It's open. They hide nothing. But yes, of course, they continue to be a problem. It's a blemish in terms of the democratic South Africa. But I think that over time, the racist white orientation will continue to wither away because of the influence of the cultural revolution.
Okay, Lucian, then let me add something that worldwide we see that rise of white supremacists, okay, the rise of far right groups, right, in North America, Europe, everywhere. So don't you think this is a challenge for what you are expecting, like it will be withered away? Like those white supremacists, they are also like the very racist, right? They think that their blood is the best blood, right? They're the best human race in this world, right? And they're growing day by day. So what do you think about this white supremacist and far right group? Like some years back, we didn't see them a lot, but now we are seeing them a lot, right? What do you think about that?
No, we are against that. In South Africa, we have similar examples of emerging, neo-fascist organizations, the right wing, who come in different forms and who are threatening violence, to defend. They still call South Africa their fatherland. They still believe that they can restore the country back to apartheid. But look, I mean, I think the weight of the tradition of democracy in South Africa is against the such forces. So we oppose them. They do not have an openly clear role. They can't take part, for instance, in the politics of the country because of their racist policies. That is forbidden.
Now, my last question on Oriana is, so don't you discuss, like in your parliament, nobody asked this question about Oriana, why this state should exist like this town should exist like this? Like, don't you have discussion on this Oriana issue?
No, there's many discussions, Comrade
Many
Bibi.
discussions?
Many discussions, a lot of discussions. But you see, if you are a Democrat, if you are a democracy, what do you do to the? I mean, there are no black people who live in Orania. I mean, that's the reality. But I'm sure there would be a lot of black people who would love to live in Orania. Because of the land, it's good. The area is mainly an agricultural area. They make a lot of money out of farming. It's a farming community. But I mean, besides that, we think they don't pose a fundamentally big threat to the nature of our democracy. In spite of their existence, South Africa remains a thriving democracy. They don't pose a significant threat to, not that we're ignoring them, but we think that the kind of attention we ought to give them is very is very limited, in the sense that they do not pose an immediate threat to the consolidation of democracy. But we use different tools. We use education. We use because they are children. They send them to universities. They make friends with anyone else. And actually, the history of Afrikaner nationalism in South Africa is a very interesting history, in the sense that some of the best revolutionaries came from this kind of backgrounds, like Orania, where
They have
their
Dutch
parents were.
background, right?
Yes. Some of the freedom fighters who fought against apartheid, they grew up in places like Orania, because as they grew up, they started to interact with other nationalities, racial groups. They began to understand that Orania is essentially a big problem.
Okay. I have another observation. Actually, in many African countries, we see that when Black people are in power, when they are in power, when they have authority, or they belong to richest people, like richer group, then they oppress Black people, right? So if we think like I cannot think that this is only a problem of color, right? Did, do you understand my question?
I understand.
So that is also
I am
shocking. So one time white people used to oppress, still it is going on, oppress Black people, right? But when they are in power, Black people, they are in power, they are also oppressing Black people. So then class inequality becomes a crucial question there, right? So what do you think about this?
Now, look, it's a very genuine and a practical question. It preoccupies the trade union movement, society in general, including the ANC, the government, the ruling party, but most of all, and most importantly, the Communist Party. The question of class solidarity is absent in South Africa, and because of the history, Afrikaner nationalism, because the rich Afrikaners relies on this poor white Afrikaners as a social base to continue to accumulate.
Hmm.
Now, we have not done enough to really, including the trade union movement, to recruit white workers. That's a subjective problem. We have to attend to that. Fortunately, there is something that we're trying to do. That it's important that we emphasize class solidarity, um, but without negating, the reality about the national question in South Africa. But we have to marry the two. They are inextricably interlinked. So the struggle for national liberation, which is also about, lifting those who were oppressed, must goes toe to toe and dovetails the struggle for class emancipation, because national oppression was essentially just instrumental to building capitalism, a strong capitalism in South Africa.
Mhm.
We can't tackle the one without the other,
Yes.
and say, now you want to give attention to class inequality without taking into account how class inequality is also an important dimension of national inequality.
Right.
So I think they go together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Bibha,
I have two more questions. Okay, I have two more questions. Then I can finish. So found that Bill Gates and son of Warren Buffett, they have some projects in Africa, and they're saying that they have like declared war against poverty. Are you aware of this Bill Gates project and Warren Buffett's son's project in Africa?
Yeah, not only in Africa, but throughout the world. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so
ওকে কি হারাই বললাম নাকি মোমেন?
নেটওয়ার্ক প্রবলেম হচ্ছে।
হ্যাঁ
Is everything okay?
আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, ও আসা না পর্যন্ত মোমেন ভাই আপনি ওই কারো কারো প্রশ্ন আছে মন্তব্য করে প্রশ্নগুলো ওরে করেন, উত্তর দিক তো বিবাহ শেষ করার পরে। তারপরে ওই যে
আমার তো আছে
যে আছে, হ্যাঁ, তারপরে যে
বিবিহর
আমাদের সাথে
জি
রোজারিও আছে, রোজারিওর কাছে যাবো। বিবিহর আরেকটা প্রশ্ন সম্ভবত আছে, তারপরে আমরা যাব। বিবিহ, আপনি একটু যে শুভ্র ফয়সালের এই যে দুইটা প্রশ্ন আছে, এই দুইটাকে একটু অ্যাড্রেস করেন। একটা আমি ধরবো, অ্যাড্রেস করেন। আর একটা প্রশ্ন করছে আমাদের সৈয়দ আলী ভাই, ডিসকাস মানে উনি এডুকেশন সেক্টর নিয়ে কিছু কথা
এটা
বলতে।
ওকে দেন, ওকেই দেন। হ্যাঁ, ওকেই দেন, ওটা ভালো হবে।
ও তো বের হয়ে গেল, ও দেখি ওর নেট মনে
না,
হয় কোনো
আসবে,
problem।
আবার আসবে। ওকে দেন।
রোজারিও কেমন আছেন আপনি?
ও
শুভ
আমাকে
জি, আপনি
বার্তা
ভালো
দিয়েছে,
আছি, আপনারা ভালো আছেন?
জি
হ্যাঁ, শুনেন, ও বার্তা দিয়েছে যে ওই যুক্ত হওয়ার চেষ্টা করতেছে, যুক্ত হবে। তো আমরা আলোচনাটা শেষ করি।
ওইটা আস্তে আস্তে
তো
আস্তে আস্তে
Yeah, Lucian is back again.
আমাকে এত
Welcome
বড়,
again.
হ্যাঁ, লুসিয়ানকে মাঝখানে দেন। ওকে, সো হাই লুসিয়ান, ওয়েলকাম ব্যাক। It was network problem. Can you hear Lucian? Lucian has sound problem, I think.
Lucian, can you hear us? I mean, can you hear me right now? Can you hear me? Your microphone is mute. Your mic is mute. Please turn on the mic kindly.
How can he cannot hear us? Maybe we can text.
না, আমরা এখান থেকে পারতেছি না। আমি ওকে, জাস্ট ওকে। হ্যাঁ, লুসিয়ান,
Lucian,
you can talk now.
can you hear us?
Lucian, can you hear me? Mr. Lucian?
Lucian, it's
What is
okay. You can talk now. Lucian, your sound is okay. ও কিছু একটা টাইপ করতেছে, I don't know.
Lucian, are you okay?
Oh, Lucian. Yes, we are hear you. Lucian, you can talk now.
Yeah, we can hear you right now.
I cannot hear. Why?
Oh, sorry. I also can't hear right now.
Hmm.
Only moment I've heard.
মোমেন ভাই ওকে বের করে দেন, আবার যুক্ত হোক।
আচ্ছা, আপনি ওরে একটু মেসেজ দিয়ে দেন যে তোরে বের
আমি
করতেছি।
মেসেজ দিতেছি, আপনি ওকে বের করে দেন।
Moment, just bring him on backstage and just push him again.
আচ্ছা, ও যে বিষয়টা এগুলো আলোচনা করলো, ওই বিষয়গুলি নিয়ে আমরা একটু আলোচনা করি, দেখি যে।
আপনি ওরে একটু টেক্সট দেন, প্রথমে টেক্সট দিয়ে তারপরে এটা একটু ইয়ে করেন।
আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, আপনারা আলোচনা করেন।
বিবিহা, আপনি কি শুনছেন প্রথম থেকে আলোচনাটা?
আমি শুনছি না, উনি যেগুলো বলছে কিভাবে হলো, হ্যাঁ, এই আন্দোলন কিভাবে হলো ইত্যাদি ইত্যাদি। এখনো আফ্রিকায় মূলত নিওলিবারাল থিং আছে। হ্যাঁ, তো যাই হোক, আমি শেষ দুইটা প্রশ্ন শেষ করি। আচ্ছা,
Lucian, your mic is mute. I cannot. Can't unmute it.
Moment, I can't hear you right now.
বিষয় হচ্ছে যে ওর মাইকটা মিউট করে রাখছে, হ্যাঁ, যার জন্য কথা বলতে শোনা যাচ্ছে না।
Mr. Lucian, your microphone is on mute. Please turn on the microphone. It's showing mute. Are you connected with phone or laptop? Can you please say in the chat?
ল্যাপটপে আছে মনে হয়।
Well, then
Rosary,
at your leftmost corner, you have the mic, and please turn it on. Just click it. হ্যাঁ বিবি কিছু বলতেছিলেন?
না ও কি আমাদের শুনতে পাচ্ছে?
ও শুনতে পাচ্ছে কিন্তু ও তো মিউট করা, যার জন্য ওর কোনো শব্দ শুনতে পাচ্ছি না আমরা।
His microphone is still on mute. Can you hear us,
Lucian,
Lucian?
Lucian, please connect again. You go out and connect again from first.
I think he doesn't need to connect again. He just needs to make
Unmute.
his microphone on, unmute himself.
হুম।
ওদের কথাও শুনতেছে না, দাঁড়ান, আমি তো ওদেরকে বার্তা পাঠালাম, আবার পাঠিয়ে দিচ্ছি। আচ্ছা, আমি
ওরে
বের হয়ে
বলেন তো আনমিউট করতে।
না, আমি বের হয়ে যাচ্ছি, ওরে হোয়াটসঅ্যাপে ফোন দিয়ে আগে বলতেছি।
ওনার
Okay.
খুবই রুসিয়ানের চেহারা কিন্তু খুবই মানে ডিস্টার্ব হয়ে আছে বেচারা। তো যেটা আমরা কথা বলছিলাম, উনি যেটা বলছিলেন আর কি, যে নিউ লিবারাল ফ্রেমওয়ার্কের মধ্যে মানে অপারেটেড হচ্ছে আর কি সাউথ আফ্রিকা। Yeah, can you please unmute yourself, please?
Lucian, please unmute yourself. As soon as you unmute, oh, he's gone already. হ্যাঁ বিবি, নিউ লিবারাল নিয়ে কি বলতেছিল লুসিয়ান?
মানে ওদের ওইখানে নিওলিবারাল সিস্টেম আর কি, নিওলিবারাল ডেমোক্রেসি। যেটা নিওলিবারাল ডেমোক্রেসিটা হচ্ছে আপনি সবকিছুকে প্রাইভেট করে দিবেন, মানে ওখানে কোনো সবকিছু প্রাইভেটাইজেশনের মধ্যে আপনি ভালো খুঁজবেন আর কি, নিওলিবারাল পলিসি যেটা বলে আর কি। তো এটাই আর কি নিওলিবারাল পলিসি, এটার কথা বলছেন। আর ওনাদের যে বিভিন্ন পার্টি, তাদের অ্যাক্টিভিটিস, তারা কি কি করেছে, এগুলো ব্যাপারে কথা বলছেন। তো আমি যে ওরিয়ানা সিটি, লুসিয়ান,
Yeah, Lucian, please speak.
ও কথা বলতেছে কিন্তু আমরা শুনতে পাচ্ছি না। ও কিন্তু কথা বলতেছে।
We can't hear you, Lucian. Can you hear us?
ওর কানেকশনে কোনো প্রবলেম।
মোমেন ভাই দাঁড়ান, আমি ওকে নতুন করে লিংক পাঠাইতেছি, দাঁড়ান।
ব্যান্ডউইথের ঝামেলা হলে আসলে মানে নতুন করে লিংক পাঠানো লাভ নাই। আচ্ছা ইলিয়াস ভাই, আপনি একটু উনাকে রিকোয়েস্ট করেন যে উনি উনার ল্যাপটপটাকে রিস্টার্ট দিক। রিস্টার্ট দিলে প্রবলেমটা ঠিক হবে।
তো যেটা বলতেছিলাম যে এই যে ওরিয়ানা সিটিটা নিয়ে, হ্যাঁ, রোজারিও, এই হোয়াইট অনলি সিটি, এটাকে ইগনোর করা আসলে আমার মনে হয়, আমরা ইগনোর অনেক সময় মনে করি কি যে থাক, এটা থাকুক, কিন্তু দেখেন এই ওরিয়ানা সিটিতে যারা হোয়াইট পিপল আছে তারা কিন্তু পপুলেশন বাড়ানোর চেষ্টা করছে, বুঝতে পারছেন? তারা ধরেন সংখ্যাগরিষ্ঠ হবে, পপুলেশন বাড়াবে, এবং তারা অলরেডি একটা অটোনমাস সিস্টেমের মধ্যে চলছে, বুঝতে পারছেন? তাদের নিজেদের কারেন্সি, নিজেদের ব্যাংক, হ্যাঁ, ওইখানে ব্ল্যাকরা প্রহিবিটেড, ওইখানে ব্ল্যাকরা ঢুকতেই পারে না।
বিপি হওয়া এখানে আপনার ওই এটা মনে রাখতে হইব যে যখন ওই এএনসি কমিউনিস্ট পার্টি যখনই করে বিপ্লবটা করে, তখন কিন্তু তাদের সাথে কিছু চুক্তিও ছিল যে হোয়াইটদের কোনোভাবে কোনো সম্পত্তি কোনো কিছুর কোনো ক্ষতি করা যাবে না। এই প্রেক্ষিতে রুশিয়ান একটা উত্তরও দিচ্ছে যে ওদেরকে আমরা ডেমোক্রেট হিসেবে ওদেরকে আমরা কিছু বলতেছি, মানে এই না যে ওদের কিছু ওদেরকে নিয়ন্ত্রণ করা হইতেছে, বিভিন্ন ভাবে ওদেরকে নিয়ন্ত্রণে রাখা হচ্ছে যাতে ওরা আমাদের জাতীয় যে আছে বিষয়গুলো আছে সেগুলো হস্তক্ষেপ না করতে পারে। এবং কি হ্যাঁ, একটু শেষ করি, তারপরে এমন কেউ বললো যে আমরা যখন অ্যাপারথাইডিজম নিয়ে লড়াই করছি তখন কিন্তু ওই এলাকার ছেলেমেয়েরাও আমাদের সাথে যুক্ত হয়ে লড়াই করেছে, সুতরাং তাদের বিরুদ্ধে আমাদের আলোচনা হচ্ছে, আমরা নিয়ন্ত্রণ করার চেষ্টা করতেছি। তবে এটা যেটা বলছেন এটা ঠিক আছে যে একটা রাষ্ট্র এদিকে নির্মূল করতে পারতেছে না, এটার কারণ হলো যে আন্তর্জাতিক বিশ্বের সাথে একটা সম্পর্ক রাখতে হয়। এই বিষয়গুলো আছে, কারণ হলো যে এখনো পর্যন্ত দক্ষিণ আফ্রিকার সবচেয়ে বড় ধনীগুলি কোম্পানিগুলি কিন্তু ব্রিটিশ। হ্যাঁ, এবং এই কথাটাও সে বলছে যে আমাদের যে কালো আফ্রিকান আছে যারা ধনী, তারা কিন্তু এই শারলদেরকে ব্যবহার করে এই ক্ষমতায় থাকার জন্য এই যে নিয়ম রোলটা চলতেছে, এই রোলটা চালানোর জন্য চেষ্টা করতেছে। তাহলে
এটাই তো বললাম, আমি জিজ্ঞাসা করলাম যে কালোরা পাওয়ারে গেলে। ওকে, Lucian, can you hear us now?
Yes, now I can hear you. Thank you.
Oh, welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Committee. Yes. We have blackouts here, electricity so from time to time. So my battery was flat, which is why it switched off. Thanks.
So I'm afraid of this Bill Gates project in Africa.
Okay.
And Warren Buffett's son's project. I'm afraid of like what is going to happen, because you see, like we have been like observing, for a long time that Africa is a place for some people to be, humanitarian, like celebrities, like philanthropists. They all go to Africa to be better human. They are giving aid, they are giving different kinds of humanitarian aids. Still, being rich countries, maybe richest country in the world, in Africa, some countries, right, resource rich, I'm talking about resource richness, still they're remaining poor, right, poor in front of people. So I think, do you think like who are getting benefited for keeping these countries poor? And what do you think, like what are the internal, like your efforts, like from African countries to make real development, real development, not to be dependent on the aid, humanitarian aid, right? So do you take this humanitarian aid as a positive thing, or do you think these are creating otherwise dependence on them, like a permanent dependence? Did I make myself clear about this thing?
Yeah.
Lucian?
Yes. No, thank you, Comrade Baby. I think your question is very clear. Because I mean the question you are raising, it's on this international organizations that are essentially agencies of the Western countries, whether it's individuals or multinational organizations, multinational companies, monopolies, that brings aid, dangles aid in Africa in exchange, for locating themselves in order for advocacy around very problematic issues that are not of benefit to the African continent. There are many examples. For instance, on this, let me just make one a close example to South Africa. We have we are a very coal-rich country. We have a lot of abundance of coal, which is essentially the primary mineral through which we produce electricity in South Africa. For over 100 years now, we've been relying on coal. Now, we understand there is climate change, and therefore what we were saying is that as South Africans, we are in agreement about the necessity to diversify our energy, our energy and produce an energy mix. So we use a little bit of nuclear here. We have to use green energy and so on. But essentially, the West is now compelling us to move completely away from coal and abandon coal in exchange for some kind of a mystical green energy that we don't know on the basis on which we are going to be able to produce energy for the needs of the country on the basis of green energy. So there are many of these agencies that have been pressurizing our government and advocating for us to move away from coal. But if you look at what the Germans, for instance, including the British now were saying, they are now going back to nuclear energy. I mean, we have a lot of resources, uranium in abundance in South Africa, to continue to produce nuclear energy. But we are being remote controlled, and it is always at the supervision of this our neo-colonial masters who dictate every term to us in terms of how the usage of some of our own resources. So this is a general problem in the African continent. But what we say, it has to do with the whole question of at what point, where is the African revolution? We think the African revolution have to be revitalized. It has to be brought back. The question of the national democratic revolution in the African continent, we believe, was essentially abandoned, and therefore we have to go back to that question, because these Western countries, look at in our electoral politics now, they are even choosing leaders for us, and these leaders are not comprador bourgeoisie. They answer to their imperial masters, imperialist masters. So I think that we have to get that issue right, and there are initiatives that the party, has taken itself in South Africa through the initiation of a forum called Africa Left Networking Forum. We bring together all the African, whether it's communist, socialist, workers' parties, to discuss from time to time the commonalities, the differences, but also to discuss a common approach around the kind of issues that we need to pay attention to in the African continent, which includes the activity of this, not only the two individuals we've mentioned, but also many of the other agencies, which we believe are a drag, to the consciousness of African people in general in different countries. So something is being done, and we said the revolution stands on two legs, on one leg, in many of our African countries, where there are strong communist parties or workers' parties or socialist parties, then you tend to have very weak trade unions. Where there are strong trade unions, you have weak parties. So it's an anomaly. We have to strengthen both. And we are discussing in relation to with the WFTU in the African continent, how to revitalize in every country, both the trade union movement, the class-oriented trade union movement, and vanguard political parties, whether they are socialist, they are communist, and or workers' parties. So I think there is an initiative here, but we think that it will take some time because of the constraints of so many things, language, and there's so many artificial barriers that are there that we have to find a way of removing as well.
Okay. So, China, there has been a Cold War going on between China and United States on funding issue, on funding in Africa. You aware of that, right? China has been investing, right, in African countries, maybe, yeah, right? And there has been a Cold War going on. So, are you welcoming China in African countries to invest? Are you hopeful for that? Are you hopeful with that?
Yes. No, we. I mean, China is welcomed in Africa. Yeah, Chinese investments are welcomed in Africa. There's a lot of trade with between China and many African countries, and generally we don't see any problem.
Do you see?
Primarily because
Sorry.
primarily no, I just mean in the main we don't see any problem, especially where investment is public investment or social investment. The problem that tends to be there is where there's an involvement of many of private Chinese firms. So we make that distinction. But look, we ourselves are trying to analyze very deeply
Right.
in terms of how do we really have to analyze the reality of Chinese investment in the African continent.
Do you see any difference between US funding in Africa and Chinese investment in Africa? Do you see any
Yes,
difference? So what
yes, there's
what
a
is the difference?
major qualitative difference. I mean, the Chinese don't tell African countries what they should do with their lives, what they should do with their resources, with their politics. They don't interfere in the politics of other countries. They are not colonial masters. They don't behave that way. Where the same they don't behave same as Americans, who often come and tell us that if you don't support the Ukraine against Russia in the war, you are not going to be a beneficiary of Africa Growth Opportunity Act. Act. So I think that the manner in which China relates to the African continent is on the basis of mutual respect as equal partners. So I think that Africa values that kind of cooperation, which is not paternalistic. Yeah. I'm not saying we're not saying there are no problems with Chinese investment, but where there are, we are able to raise with them the difficulties, and we are able to get a discussion going. We are able to listen to one another and correct where necessary some of the bad practices on the part of some of the Chinese companies. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is a big difference. Let's see what happens in future. Lucian, thank you very much. I had a great time with you. I had some more aspects to discuss with you, but we have time limitation also. So we'll keep in touch and we'll see you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Comrade Vivi.
Take care. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
থ্যাংক ইউ বিবি হাওয়া। লিসেন, আমরা এবার ফিরবো আক্কেল ভাইয়ের কাছে। আক্কেল ভাই, আমরা প্রায় 1 ঘন্টা 30 মিনিট কথা বলেছি। লুসিয়ানের কাছে যদি আপনার কোনো প্রশ্ন
তো আক্কেল ভাইয়ের কাছে ফেরার আগে ওই প্রশ্নটা শুভ ফাইসাল নাকি প্রশ্নটা করেন, উত্তর দিক, তারপরে আক্কেল ভাই শুরু করো, কি বলেন?
জি, ইলিয়াস ভাই, আপনি করেন প্রশ্নটা।
আমি তো মোবাইল থেকে দেখতে পাচ্ছি না, আপনি একটু পড়ে শোনান।
Okay, I can help. So Lucian, there is a question from our audience. Can you see that question? Can you see that comment, Lucian?
Listen, you can see the question. The Subro Faisal take your question as you suggest in your talk. You're mute. Please listen. You can unmute your button.
Oh, okay. I can see the question, but it's so small. I can't be able to
Okay,
read.
let me read, okay, for
Yes,
you.
please read.
So this is asked by Shubhra Faisal. So he's asking, as you suggested in your talk that you want working class people should take the charge of the power, but are they steady in the situation, or are they stable enough to do so? I mean, the use of power.
Are they?
Like the question is like working class, you want working class people should take the charge of the power. So he's asking, but are they steady in the situation, or are they stable in a, like, do they have that capacity to be in power, to take the charge of power? Like working class, he's asking about working class. Are they capable of taking charge? That's the question.
Yeah, okay. No, thank you for the question. But I mean, I think whether the working class is ready or not, I think from country to country it differs. I think, like I indicated, that the variant of capitalist rule in South Africa, started many years ago by the early. By the early 20th century, South Africa had a very large industrial proletariat in the mining, the gold and the diamond mining sector, and we reached in a very short space of time a very rapid stage of industrialization in this country. And I think that the history, the working class movement is a very strong, a relatively long historical experience of class struggle, of the fight against intense capitalist exploitation. I think it understands the country in which it's operating. It understands the basic demands. It understands the issue of the fight for social justice. It understands the needs. I mean, I'm not sure, because South Africa was never led by the working class, but so was the Soviet Union before 1917. But at that time, the working class had to learn out of no experience of socialist construction. They built one of the relatively prosperous socialist South Africa. So I think the question of working class leadership in South Africa in the context of the national democratic revolution is not really a very difficult, onerous question. I think it's about how do you strengthen democracy, how do you build the basics, um, infrastructure, schools, clinics. So the working class is capable of making those kind of decisions, because it is in the majority. It is affected by the absence of uh, uh, this very socio-economic basics, because this is not how capitalist South Africa operates. It operates on the basis of profit. Healthcare in our country is very lopsided, is very unequal. So even the bulk of social investment in healthcare in South Africa, I would say 75% of the national budget on health goes to benefit very few, 15% of the population. And this fact was even raised by the the United Nations agencies, World Health Organization, to say, but you are not investing in health for the majority of the population, but in the rest of your resources are going into the hands of very few. What do you do about it? Which is why we are now trying to reintroduce the national health insurance, which is a universal, which promotes universal access. So there there are those initiatives, and I think it is working class people that are responsible for those kind of decisions. But it's not easy, although it's a decision government. But the implementation is just not there because of the heavy interference, the resistance on the part of capital to give in to this demand for a universal healthcare system. So it's a fight. For everything, we have to fight. But I think, as far as capacity is concerned, we are capable. The working class is capable to make the right decision about what is necessary to meet the most basic and minimum needs of society.
ওকে, মোহন ভাই, আক্কেল ভাই বলার আগে আমি একটু বলি, আরেকজন একটা প্রশ্ন করছে। সে প্রশ্নটা হলো যে, যদি আমি বলি, হ্যাঁ, এই প্রশ্নটা ওই উত্তরে এর আগে আমাদের পুরো আলোচনা যে শুনে থাকেন প্রশ্নদাতা, তো ওই দক্ষিণ আফ্রিকা কমিউনিস্ট পার্টিটা প্রতিষ্ঠিত করেছে সাদারা, অর্থাৎ পূর্ব ইউরোপের কমিউনিস্টের যে দেশগুলি ছিল তারা গিয়ে দক্ষিণ আফ্রিকাতে কমিউনিস্ট পার্টি প্রতিষ্ঠা করে। হ্যাঁ, আক্কেল ভাই।
আমরা আক্কেল ভাইয়ের কাছে যাওয়ার আগে আক্কেল ভাই একটু শোনা যাচ্ছে রোজারিও একটু এর আগে আসছে। আক্কেল ভাই প্লিজ একটু 2 মিনিট একটু হোল্ড করেন। রোজারিও ছোট্ট প্রশ্ন আমরা নিয়ে আপনি আক্কেলের কাছে ফিরবো। রোজারিও।
Thank you, Momen. I would like to ask some question to Lucian. So, Lucian, can you hear me?
I can hear
Yeah.
you.
Okay. So, what's the current condition of Black people in South Africa? Are they getting enough opportunities to enroll in universities, enroll in government jobs, or enroll in politics? Are they facing the discrimination like the past days?
Look, universities in South Africa were also divided. So you had 3 categories of universities. You had those which were Afrikaans, which means the white oppressors had their own universities where they could disseminate knowledge for their own white race in South Africa. But then you also had black universities. They built black universities in the Bantustans, in the enclaves, which were meant for black people, with inferior quality, no resources, and all of that. And then you had the white liberal institutions, which were very high quality universities, University of Cape Town, and then the white universities, Afrikaner universities, is like University of Stellenbosch, where they would speak their language. And Afrikaans was a medium of instruction. They didn't even want to compromise and introduce English. They would speak Afrikaans only, which is a language that was rejected by the majority against the imposition of the government in 1976, which led to the uprising, Soweto uprising. But I can say there's a qualitative change now, in the sense that most of the barriers have been removed, and everything is codified in the law that governs the universities. That they don't have to be discriminatory. They have to transform. They have to introduce new policies, and they have to accommodate different languages, especially English, and combine medium of instructions with English, so that non-Afrikaner speakers can also be able to have access to learning material. So that situation is changing, and I don't think that there is a lot of discrimination. You have racist practices in some, especially the white Afrikaner universities, and Comrade Bibi made a good example of the racism where a white student was, urinating on a black student and their books and all of that. But that situation was widely condemned throughout the entire country, and even institutions such as the Human Rights Commission here made sure that something like that is not repeated. That's white student who did that was punished severely uh, uh, by the university itself, and they started introducing more programs, to promote diversity, cultural, racial diversity in the institution. But like I say, eliminating racism and apartheid, consciousness will take a long time. You will still face a bit of discrimination, including in the workplace after graduation. A lot of black students are unemployed, but if you profile that, the chances for an African black student to who study the same degree as their white counterpart at university, the chances for a black student to get employment are reduced. So the labor market dynamics also are generally influenced by some of their racist past, and the reality is quite sad because mostly we are talking private companies, which still belongs to many white Afrikaners and white people in South Africa. So they make their own policies, they decide, and they can cover those so as not to appear overtly racist, but they nevertheless remain racist in the sense that preference is given to certain white in some instances. But you also do have genuinely good employers in terms of equity, where they would set targets in line with employment equity in the policies in the country, based on the percentages of the population, including for women to be to gain employment especially in the private sector. I think in the state is fairly easy. The targets are there, and that the equity has been superseded. The problem is in the private sector, and I think it will be there for a long time. Sometimes it is also because we are not enforcing the labor legislation, and ensuring minimum requirements are adhered to. So I think that there is a chronic problem of enforcement of legislation in South Africa, and I think we can do better to improve in that regard.
Okay, so is the condition kind of same in case of government job and politics?
Yeah, in government, like I said, in government, it's you don't have any serious problems with discriminatory employment practices in the state.
Okay, so are the white people, are the whites possessing the same bias and bigotry till now, like they used to possess back in 1960s or 70s?
Which white people in general?
In general, yeah.
Yeah, the situation. No. I think South Africa, this. I think not everything that Nelson Mandela tried to do. We call it the Rainbow Nation. A nation which is diverse. Not everything is lost. There's real progress made in terms of building one, unified country with racial harmony. But again, the difficulty is that must be accompanied by, equality, economic equality. I think that's where mostly we are lagging, because sometimes the problem is not so much that, I have a white friend, but because I have no economic resources to entrench my blackness, because of the inequality issue and lack of a real progress in terms of the transfer of resources from the white minority to black majority, you know. So that remains a big factor. But we have made a lot of progress, and I think that there is appetite to consolidate that. And we can do it, but not without really paying a lot of attention on economic transformation in our society. I think we require that quite a lot.
Okay, regarding racism, I think it's evident almost all across the globe. But in case of United States of America or in Europe, we can observe multiple interracial couples. I mean, there are plenty of interracial couples. But in case of South Africa, the number of interracial couple is very negligible. Is it really authentic?
Yeah, because remember, we were separated for so many years, and it was criminal. You know, interracial marriages were criminal. I mean, some people had to flee the country. They had to leave the country.
I mean,
Others had to
people
prepare.
were killed for marrying a person of different race.
They are
I mean,
now.
oh, that's really
Yes,
sad.
no, they are. Yes, yeah. But you see, again, the tradition of the tradition of the past still weighs like a nightmare in the brains of the, the living now, because we are still reminded about the how illegal it was. So I think there are those kind of at the level of social consciousness, the kind of sort of barriers towards that, because the reality still it remains that we are still separated, maybe not by walls and borders, but we still remain separated. So I think that it will take time for the numbers to increase. I mean, apartheid had very terrible legislation. Not only did it prohibit interracial marriages, but even certain black people, workers in industry, in the compounds, in the mines, were also prohibited from, or they had to be receive permission, or they were prohibited by law to engage in to sleep with their wives. There's a law which the apartheid regime passed, prohibiting black workers from sleeping with their wives, and basically regulating that. That you had the most horrendous laws under apartheid, which I think although they were eliminated,
So
but
basically, black women were sexually abused by the whites under that law.
Come again?
I mean to say that the black women were really sexually abused by the white men under that law.
Yes.
Oh.
No, there is that reality as well. There is that reality. I don't know. I mean, I've not come across any study where it was really reflected upon intensely. But I mean, it's a known secret that there was this kind of abuse that was carried out for many years.
ওকে রোজারিও, আপনার কি আরো প্রশ্ন আছে?
না, আমার আর কোনো প্রশ্ন নাই। প্লিজ প্রসিড উইথ আক্কেল ভাই।
আক্কেল ভাই।
হ্যাঁ, আমার প্রশ্ন ছিল, কিন্তু আপনাদের প্রশ্ন করাতে আমার প্রশ্ন হয়ে গেছে, শুনছি আমি সব। হ্যাঁ, কিন্তু একটা প্রশ্ন ওনারে করতে চাই। হ্যালো, একটা প্রশ্ন করতে চাই যে what do you think about the war of Ukraine and Russia?
Do you understand Russian? What's your opinion about the war of Ukraine and Russia?
Comrades, look, yeah, that I mean, I'm sure you all know how controversial the issue is, but the position our party has taken, and I would like to again just emphasize that we are noting that even within the communist movement internationally, there is no one common answer to this question. But the position our party has taken is that Russia is not imperialist, so we cannot define the war between Ukraine and Russia as an inter-imperialist conflict. Yeah, so that is the position. I think the party perceives Russia's response as a war of self-defense against the encroachment of mainly US-led NATO imperialist forces in and around the Russian territory. But this doesn't mean that, look, we have abandoned Lenin's analysis of but I think that we were open to being engaged and convinced by other parties who don't see things the same. But essentially, we agree that it is in the nature of capitalism to lead to wars, such as the war between Russia and Ukraine. But our party has selected to support Russia because we believe it is fighting a just war against US-led NATO aggression.
Thank you.
মোমেন কি করবেন এখন?
হ্যাঁ, একদম শেষ মুহূর্তে আসলে আজকের আলোচনাটা মূল যে টপিক ছিল সেটা বিবিহা খুব ভালো টাচ করলেন। রোজারিও লাস্ট দুটো কোশ্চেনের প্রশ্নটা খুব ভালোভাবে টাচ করলেন। আমার মনে হয় আজকে আলোচনাটা আমরা আমি আমার যে অ্যাজাম্পশন তাতে 85% আমরা সাকসেস হয়েছি। অনেকগুলো তথ্য বেরিয়ে এসেছে এবং আমরা মনে হয় আরেকটা এপিসোড যদি করি নেক্সট একটা ডেট নিয়ে ওর কাছ থেকে, তাহলে মনে হয় এটা আরো ভালো হবে। তো রোজারিও, থ্যাংক ইউ ফর জয়নিং। ইলিয়াস ভাই শেষ একটু সাথে
ওর একটু বলে নিই। Lucian, we are talking about our discussion today, what it was, how it was. We are agree with you, all of us, that it was an interesting discussion. We'll be again in discussion next time about the same issue and questions. So we want to finish today. If you have any thing to say, conclusion, you can say now.
Okay, no, I don't have a lot to say. Just to thank you, Comrade Elias, Comrade Momon, and all the comrades who made time to join the discussion. I think I have learned a lot as well from you, with your contributions, your comments, your discussions, your questions, and I hope we can take this relationship and to be a relationship between yourselves and the South African Communist Party, and continue to engage and talk bilaterally, to exchange, to have discussions on many issues, including issues such as what we were discussing today. So I hope it's not the last time that we have such a discussion. Okay, thank you very much.
For your information, everyone was not a comrade. Their participation are, so it's not a problem. We'll continue our discussion about South Africa. We want to know about South Africa details, everything, because it helps us to struggle in our lives, in our country, everywhere we live. So discussion make us strong to fight against any kind of anti-workers measure. Thank you very much. Moment, if you can't finish it.
No, it's almost finished. Thank you for joining, and hope we'll meet you again. Mr. Ilyas will connect you. ওকে, থ্যাংক ইউ, ধন্যবাদ আক্কেল ভাই, রোজারিও, ইলিয়াস ভাই, সকলকে ধন্যবাদ আজকে আলোচনাটা শোনার জন্য, এবং এটা খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ আলোচনা ছিল। আমরা নেক্সট আরেকটা প্রোগ্রাম করব ওকে নিয়ে, কারণ আসলে এই যে বর্ণবাদের যে বিষয়টি, এটা নিয়ে একটা লম্বা আলাপ, এবং এর হিস্ট্রিটা অনেক বড়। আমরা যে আন্দোলনটা করি, এটা তো ধর্ম, বর্ণ, গোত্র, এই যে একটা রেসিস্ট মনোভাব, এর বাইরে বেরিয়ে এসে আমাদের চিন্তা, আমাদের কথা বলা, শুধু যে ধর্ম, শুধু পলিটিক্স না, সব জায়গায় যে রেসিজম চলে, বর্ণবাদ, ব্ল্যাক হোয়াইট, তারপরে জাতি, মানে বিভিন্ন ভাবে, এইটার বিরুদ্ধে হচ্ছে আমাদের কথা বলা, এবং এই আমাদের ফাইটটা অব্যাহত থাকবে। সেটাই স্ট্রিমইয়ার্ডের মাধ্যমে হোক, ফেসবুকে হোক, ইউটিউবে হোক, সব জায়গায় আমরা আশা করি মানুষ শুনবে, এবং এটা শুনে যদি মানে কারো মধ্যে কোনো প্রশ্ন আসে, আমার মনে হচ্ছে হবে যে ওটাই আমাদের সাকসেসনেস, ওখান থেকে আমরা বেরিয়ে আসতে পারবো। তো সকলকে ধন্যবাদ জানিয়ে আমরা আজকের অনুষ্ঠান এখানেই শেষ করছি। শুভকামনা, শুভরাত্রি, গুড নাইট।
গুড নাইট।
Thank you. Good night.